My cousin stole my family business, my boyfriend, and the life I built. But years later, I rose back stronger and took everything back. I grew up in a close-knit family, not the kind where we all live on top of each other, but the kind where holidays, birthdays, and even random Sundays were spent together. My parents co-owned a small chain of artisan bakeries with my aunt and uncle. It started with one storefront, and over the years it turned into 5. I grew up around cinnamon rolls, staff schedules, and spreadsheets. From the time I was 13, I was shadowing my parents and learning the ropes. Everyone assumed that after college, I'd come back and eventually take over operations. Camille was always around. She lived 10 minutes away, and since our moms were sisters, there wasn't a gathering where she wasn't included. She was the kind of kid who always had to outshine you, but did it in a way where you couldn't call her out. She'd compliment my science fair project while slipping in that hers won first place at the regional level. She'd laugh at jokes I made, then retell them louder for the room as if she came up with them. It was harmless stuff when we were young, not so harmless when we grew up. While I was pouring myself into business courses, internships, and bakery operations every summer, Camille was focused on a different path. She studied marketing, bounced between jobs, and said things like, "I'm not built for a 9-to-5 life." Nobody minded that. She had the freedom to figure things out. The plan for the bakery was always clear. I'd finish college, return as the operations lead, and eventually step into full leadership as my parents phased out. Then, during my final semester, everything changed. I landed in the hospital with a sudden gallbladder infection that turned into emergency surgery. It came out of nowhere. One minute I was preparing for finals. The next, I was on bed rest for 6 weeks and could barely sit upright without pain. While I was recovering, Camille stepped in temporarily, they said, just to help keep things running. By the time I got back, my desk was gone. The office had been rearranged. Projects I had started were now being reported under Camille's name. Staff I trained were taking direction from her. When I asked my parents what was going on, they told me Camille had been a real lifesaver and that I needed to ease back in, not stir up drama. They said Camille had shown a surprising natural sense for business, and that I should focus on healing. I tried to stay calm, thinking it would sort itself out. It didn't. Camille went from temporary help to full-time partner. She began making decisions, speaking in meetings, and, worst of all, telling people that I'd been struggling with my emotional capacity for leadership. I overheard her one day telling a supplier that I was sweet but too fragile to handle the pressure. She called my absence a wake-up call for the business, as if my body failing me proved I wasn't reliable. No one corrected her. When I finally confronted my parents, they told me not to make things worse. They said family unity mattered more than positions, that Camille was doing well, and that I should focus on moving forward. I asked them what that meant for me, and they said I could take on a supporting role until things settled. Translation: the business I spent my life preparing for was no longer mine. It would have been enough if that were the only betrayal, but Camille wasn't finished. My boyfriend of 2 years, Simon, someone I introduced to the family, someone who used to sit with me at bakery meetings just to understand my world, slowly got closer to Camille during my recovery. I noticed they'd joke more, stand a little too close, and tag each other in inside joke posts. I chalked it up to my imagination until one night, Simon told me we should take a break. A week later, I found out from a mutual friend that he and Camille had gone out for drinks and never stopped seeing each other. When I confronted them, Camille smirked and said Simon had been confused, that maybe I had misread the seriousness of our relationship. No apologies, no guilt, just a smug look and a shoulder shrug. The worst part, no one in the family held them accountable. My parents told me to move on. My aunt said love is unpredictable. They even said Simon might be better off with someone more decisive than me. I packed a bag that night and left. I moved to a new city, cut contact with most of them, and started therapy. I didn't scream. I didn't post cryptic social media updates. I just disappeared. For 3 years, I rebuilt. I got into luxury real estate and started making quiet connections. My clients were rich, discreet, and well-connected. I learned how to speak their language. I learned how to move like they do, not with noise, but with precision. Then last month, I opened my inbox and saw a save the date, Camille and Simon. No personal message, no phone call, just a mass email invite with my name buried in the CC list. I didn't reply. I didn't need to because I knew Simon's family now, and they knew me. Unlike Camille, they actually remembered who introduced him to their world in the first place. More importantly, I knew exactly what that world would do when they found out who he was marrying. When I was dating Simon, I used to bring him to networking events, real estate events, gallery openings, business mixers, the kind of places where old money circles mingle with new investments. He was always eager to tag along, always curious, always watching. He asked questions, took mental notes, and tried to dress the part even when it didn't quite fit. One of the families I introduced him to back then was the Hamilton family. The Hamiltons are what people call legacy wealth. Their last name is on hospital wings, art centers, and 2 city blocks downtown. I met them through work. Graham Hamilton was one of my clients. He had just inherited a few properties and needed someone discreet and efficient. We weren't close friends, but we got along well enough to stay in touch after the deal closed. When the engagement email from Camille and Simon landed in my inbox, I remembered something. The boutique investment firm Simon bragged about working at had backing from the Hamiltons, the same Hamiltons Simon met through me. He probably never even realized it. I reached out to Graham under the excuse of following up on a property he'd been curious about. We met for lunch at a private club, and I told him everything, not with tears or drama, just the facts. He remembered Simon from those old events and even laughed a little when I told him how things turned out. Then I asked for a favor. Graham agreed to host a dinner, formal, quiet Hamilton style, no press, just a small guest list. He sent the invite directly to Camille and Simon, framing it as a welcome to the family circle. Camille responded within 10 minutes. The dinner was held at their estate on a Saturday night. Camille showed up in a dress that looked too expensive for her usual taste. She kept name-dropping designers and hinted at future collaborations. Simon, meanwhile, looked like he was trying to play catch-up with every conversation in the room. They didn't realize that almost everyone at that table knew exactly who they were and what they'd done. Graham's sister, Laya, took the lead. She made herself Camille's new best friend for the night, complimenting her hair, her outfit, her glow. Then, gently, she started asking questions about the bakery, the family business, and Camille's rise to leadership. Camille didn't hold back. She said she turned things around, brought in new systems, and rescued the business when it was on the edge of collapse. She even claimed Simon had grown into a more serious man under her influence. Laya nodded, smiled, and kept her phone recording in her lap the whole time. Mid-story, as Camille was talking about turning a regional supplier deal into a national one, something I did years ago, Graham's mother joined the conversation. She didn't say much, just watched and listened. Then, near the end of the night, she turned to Camille and said, "I hope you continue to be the woman Simon believes you are. That kind of image is hard to maintain." Camille froze for a second, smiled, and excused herself to go powder her nose. 2 days later, I got a text from her. It read, "Funny running into your old crowd. They didn't know you were still relevant." I didn't reply, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because silence makes certain people more nervous than words ever could. That's when things started to shift. Simon noticed something was off. Camille was distracted, short-tempered, and suddenly obsessed with whether the Hamiltons liked her. She kept replaying parts of the dinner out loud, like she was trying to decode hidden messages. When Simon asked what was wrong, she told him he was imagining things, and changed the subject. Meanwhile, the Hamiltons began pulling back their support from Simon's firm. Not completely, just enough to make things slightly uncomfortable. Fewer introductions, slower approvals, canceled lunches. It was just enough to start a quiet ripple without pointing fingers. The next move came quickly. I reached out to Evelyn Hamilton, Graham and Laya's cousin. She's known for hosting bachelorette brunches that double as social vetting tests. Her guest list is invite-only, curated, and often leads to deeper social connections or silent blacklisting. I sent Evelyn a short message with a picture of the engagement invite and asked if she had room for one more at her next event. I didn't have to explain anything. Evelyn already knew what kind of person Camille was. The brunch invite was in the mail by the end of the day. Camille received it 3 days later and posted a picture of it online with the caption, "Finally being seen where I belong." She tagged the location, the champagne brand, and even added a song snippet that played the lyrics, "This is the life I deserve." What she didn't know was that the brunch wouldn't be about welcoming her into anything. It would be about letting her talk, because the best way to show people who someone really is to just give them the room and let them speak freely. And Camille always loved the sound of her own voice. Camille got the brunch invite from Evelyn Hamilton a week after the estate dinner. The envelope was heavy, cream-colored, with her name handwritten in gold ink. Inside was a folded card inviting her to an exclusive bachelorette brunch at Evelyn's countryside villa, along with a note that read, "You were an intriguing presence at dinner. I'd love to hear more." She posted it online within an hour. The caption read, "Finally being seen where I belong," and the hashtags included everything from #EliteInvite to #NextLevel. She tagged Evelyn, the stationery brand, and even the florist from the estate dinner. Evelyn called me that evening. She said she wanted to make the brunch worthwhile. I gave her a short list of topics to steer the conversation toward: money, ethics, family loyalty, and how Camille talks about social class. I told her that if Camille was nudged the right way, she'd take the bait without even realizing it. The brunch was held on a Sunday morning at Evelyn's villa, an ivy-covered estate tucked behind iron gates and a quarter-mile driveway. Camille arrived in a designer dress that still had the rental barcode tag under the hem, carrying a structured handbag and wearing oversized sunglasses indoors. She brought macarons from a well-known patisserie and kept mentioning how she had future plans with them for the wedding dessert table. The other women there were all Hamilton-affiliated, not by name but by marriage, old money, or board positions. Camille didn't pick up on that. She thought she was the star. Evelyn began by complimenting Camille's confidence. One of the guests asked about the bakery. Camille immediately launched into a story about how she turned it around, saved it from mismanagement, and introduced modern systems that made it profitable. She said I had always been too emotional to make hard calls, and that sometimes you need to put business before feelings, even if family doesn't get it. Another woman asked if she and I had made peace. Camille rolled her eyes and said I was still obsessed and couldn't handle someone else being happy. She said I had always played the victim and couldn't handle that she was the one who made it out. One of the women, who runs a nonprofit for mental health awareness, asked gently if I had ever sought therapy. Camille laughed and said, "Harper's the kind of girl who thinks therapy is a personality trait." The room went quiet for a full 10 seconds. No one challenged her, no one pushed back. They just sipped their drinks and made eye contact across the table. Camille didn't notice. She moved on to talking about Simon, calling herself the reason he was now refined and focused. She claimed credit for getting him the boutique investment job, saying he never really had direction until I gave him some. What Camille didn't know was that one of the guests, the same one who asked about therapy, had been discreetly recording the entire conversation. The audio was clean, every insult, every brag, every spin of the truth. By Tuesday, that recording was in Evelyn's inbox. She sent it to me without commentary. I listened to the full thing. Then I uploaded it to a private cloud link, removed all identifying metadata, and sent it anonymously to 2 contacts at Simon's firm. Not loudly, just dropped into the right inboxes with the subject line, "Due Diligence." That Thursday, 2 meetings at the firm were pushed without explanation. By Friday, Simon noticed that 3 senior executives had stopped greeting him in the hallway. His usual lunch group started choosing different tables. One of his colleagues asked if he'd heard a certain podcast episode. He hadn't, but he started piecing things together. Simon asked Camille if she'd said anything bold at the brunch. She told him the women loved her, and that they were just intimidated by confidence. She told him not to let jealousy cloud his judgment. Then she suggested he stop talking to his sister so much, just in case she was getting in his head. Meanwhile, another invitation went out, a CO-Ed charity event hosted by the Hamiltons with assigned seating. Camille would be placed next to Graham's father, the most reserved member of the family and the one who usually doesn't engage unless something needs correcting. I prepared the next step. I printed out a dossier, dates, screenshots, and copies of emails where Camille had undermined me during my recovery. I included proof of her manipulation, the lies she told the family, and a list of bakery changes she took credit for that were actually mine. I filed it in an envelope with no return address and mailed it directly to Simon's sister. She had always been kind to me. We never stayed in touch after I left, but she knew what happened wasn't clean. I knew she'd read every page, and I knew she wouldn't tell anyone where it came from. As for Camille, she kept bragging that the brunch had opened new doors for her and that powerful women respect powerful women. She even hinted at hosting her own brunch in a few months. What she didn't know was that the most powerful people in that room weren't impressed. They were documenting her, cataloging, quietly deciding what kind of person she was and whether she belonged anywhere near their world. As of that moment, the answer was already becoming clear. Simon's parents invited Camille for a weekend at their countryside estate, a formal welcome, the kind that meant a lot in their circle. It was supposed to be low-key, just close family, a few meals, and some walks on the property. Camille treated it like a red carpet event. She arrived in a car service, stepped out in a gown-length designer coat, and announced the label of each accessory as she walked in. The shoes, the bag, even her nail polish brand, all named loudly. Simon's sister, Ava, who had received the dossier mailed anonymously, greeted Camille with a polite smile. She played along, offered a quick tour of the estate, and watched everything. Ava didn't raise her voice or show a single hint that she knew what was behind the curtain, but she didn't look away either. The next morning, Camille woke early to make breakfast for the family, something she had never done in her own home. She served slightly burnt toast and undercooked eggs, insisting on calling it charming and rustic. She called herself a traditional woman who values home life, which stood out considering she had once told Ava over drinks that domestic life was a trap for women with no ambition. Later that day, Ava invited Camille on a short walk around the garden trails. They made small talk about the upcoming wedding, honeymoon options, and guest list limits. Then casually, Ava asked her, "Do you ever feel guilty about how you got here?" Camille smiled and answered, "What matters is that I am here." What she didn't know was that Ava had her phone recording in her pocket under the excuse of testing a new voice note app. That evening, they had a formal family dinner. Camille wore another show-stopping outfit and took the chance to brag about the bakery. She claimed she took over when it was falling apart, implemented a system that tripled its revenue, and personally trained all the new staff. Simon's father, who had read the entire dossier cover to cover, asked simple follow-up questions. How many locations? What system exactly? Who was their top supplier last year? Camille fumbled. She gave the wrong number of stores, quoted a revenue figure that didn't exist, and even named a supplier they had dropped 3 years ago. There was a long pause at the table. Simon looked at her like he had never heard any of this before. She brushed it off, laughed, and tried to change the subject. He didn't. After dinner, Camille pulled aside one of Simon's uncles and tried to steer the conversation toward building strong alliances through marriage. She made a comment about choosing the right kind of people to marry into. The uncle raised his glass and said, "Be careful who you think is under you." Then he walked off without another word. While all this was happening, I made a quiet move of my own. I reached out to someone in the wedding planning scene who handles vendor coordination for high-end events. I asked if Camille's name had come up in bookings. It had, more than once. One of the planners called me after I explained who I was and asked if I was the Harper Camille kept bringing up. Camille had yelled at their team over sample menus, refused to pay a deposit, and told them they should feel lucky to have her name attached to their business. When they pushed back, she said, "You know, the Hamiltons will hear about this." Except she wasn't even invited to their next event. That planner passed the word along to a few others. Within a week, vendors across the local luxury event circle started labeling her as high-risk, entitled, and disrespectful. The whispers were moving faster than the invitations she sent out. After the countryside visit, Simon called for a break. He didn't say it was over. He said they needed space to clear their heads before the wedding. Camille told him he was just overwhelmed by privilege and didn't know how to handle a powerful woman. He stayed quiet and moved into a guest room. By then, I had passed the brunch recording, the one where Camille mocked mental health and called me obsessed, to a podcast host who features anonymous stories about social climbers and toxic relationships. The episode wasn't out yet, but it was coming. Camille still had no idea what was building behind her. She was busy trying to find a new florist after the last one canceled. She was updating her registry and calling herself a future Hamilton on social media. But behind the scenes, the same people she was trying to impress were already preparing to close the door. The next public event she was invited to would be the last one she'd ever be welcomed at. And this time, every move she made would be under a microscope. The podcast episode dropped on a Wednesday morning. The title was simple, "The Social Climber Who Took Everything." The host was known for featuring real, anonymously sourced stories about relationship power plays and secret betrayals by women who weaponized charm to climb ladders they never built. Camille's brunch audio made up nearly half the episode. Her voice, her stories, her laughter as she tore into my reputation. Names were changed, but for anyone in our circle, it wasn't hard to figure out who it was. By noon, posts started appearing in private Facebook groups. People asked if anyone else recognized the woman in the story. Screenshots were shared. Subtle comments about that brunch floated across several threads. One subreddit, known for discussing social scandals, picked it up next. Someone posted a side-by-side of Camille's engagement shoot and a quote from the podcast. It exploded overnight. Simon's sister, Ava, made an anonymous comment under one of the top posts. She confirmed a few minor details, no names, no family titles, just enough to validate the story without exposing anyone directly. That post got traction fast. More listeners chimed in, connecting dots. A few even linked Camille's online profiles to her quotes. The clips were now getting stitched into TikToks with captions like, "When your cousin's karma goes public" and hashtag fake fairy tale. By Friday, Camille's follower count had dropped by a noticeable chunk. Her sponsored posts, makeup, brands, boutique jewelry, and even a meal delivery service were suddenly getting fewer likes. The comments had shifted. Instead of compliments, she was getting cryptic remarks like, "Funny how you treat family, huh? And therapy isn't a joke." 2 wedding vendors canceled. One was her calligrapher, who claimed scheduling conflicts, and the other was her floral designer, who refunded her deposit but said their team wasn't a good fit for the event's tone. Both had apparently heard the episode. Camille tried to fix the damage. She contacted a local public relations firm that specialized in reputation recovery, hoping for a fast turnaround. After a preliminary background check, they declined to take her on. Their polite but firm reason: "We believe the story already has too much traction to be repositioned without further risk." Meanwhile, Simon was catching up. He confronted Camille about the brunch recording. She denied it at first, then turned it around and accused him of being too soft to handle success. She called him weak, said he was listening to people who wanted to tear her down because they couldn't stand to see her win. She left the apartment for 2 nights. When she came back, Simon suggested pushing the wedding date back. He said it was for financial clarity. Camille exploded. She accused him of trying to leave her, claimed she'd built him into who he was, and shouted that she wouldn't be left at the altar like some cautionary tale. Around the same time, Graham Hamilton hosted another dinner, one of his quarterly charity galas. This time, neither Simon nor Camille was invited. The omission was public. The guest list was posted, tagged, and shared. People noticed fast. Whispers started among guests. Camille had overplayed her hand, and Simon might not even be part of the picture for long. I sent a thank you gift to Evelyn Hamilton, a rare orchid in a crystal planter with a handwritten note. "Your brunch was the highlight of her season." She sent back a single emoji, the chess queen. Camille, now scrambling to stay relevant, decided to host her own exclusive soiree the following weekend. She booked a rooftop venue, ordered custom signage, and sent out glossy invitations. Barely 8 people showed up. Most were acquaintances who stayed for the drinks and left within the hour. No one posted about it. One person shared a blurry shot on their story and captioned it, "When the vibe is desperation." While Camille was still trying to recover from that, Simon's mother reached out to me. She asked if we could meet privately. No drama, no confrontation. I agreed. We met at a quiet restaurant, and I brought a printed folder of receipts, dated messages, and screenshots. I didn't over-explain. I just laid it out: what happened during my surgery, what Camille did with the business, the lies, the manipulation, the stolen relationship. Simon's mother didn't interrupt. She read every page carefully, asked for a few copies, and before she left, she said, "Thank you for your grace." That night, I got a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Simon's old college roommate. He wrote, "Thought you should know. Simon's been asking people whether it's too late to back out. The storm hadn't hit its peak yet, but the wind was picking up fast, and Camille was standing in the center of it, still spinning like she thought she had control. She had no idea how far from the top she'd already fallen." Simon met up with an old friend from college, someone he used to trust when things got messy. Over lunch, he admitted he wasn't sure about Camille anymore. He brought up the podcast, the canceled vendors, and the distance growing between them. The friend told him to stop guessing and start checking. Go back, look at your own messages, see what's been rewritten. That night, Simon opened his old phone backups. He started scrolling through old conversations, voice notes, and screenshots he hadn't deleted. One of them was a message, from me, sent just before I went into surgery, wishing him luck for a meeting and thanking him for always being there. Another was a short voice note of me talking about expansion plans for the bakery. Calm, focused, not the version Camille had described to him for years. He kept scrolling. He found messages where Camille pushed him to ignore my calls while I was recovering, telling him I was unstable and clinging to him out of fear. He found calendar invites that were originally mine, events I'd put him on the guest list for, which Camille later took over. The pattern was clear. My life hadn't just been stolen, it had been edited. The next morning, Simon sent me a text: "I owe you an apology. I didn't see it back then. Can we talk?" I didn't take the call. Instead, I sent him a document. No emotion, no commentary, just a clean, dated timeline, what happened when, with supporting screenshots. I listed bakery meetings, events, vendor contracts, and quotes Camille had repurposed. I didn't add how I felt, I just handed him the truth, line by line. Simon read it twice, then he took it to his father. He laid everything out and said, "If I marry her, I think I'll lose everyone else." His father didn't ask for details. He just said, "Then you already know the answer." Later that day, Camille opened Simon's laptop while he was showering. She found the document, read through every line, and saw my name at the bottom of the file properties. She waited until he came out, slammed the laptop shut, and demanded to know why I was back in their lives. When Simon didn't argue, she panicked. She told him she was pregnant. He asked for a test. She paused, then admitted she lied. "I just needed more time," she said. That was it. Simon told her the engagement was off. He didn't yell, he didn't argue. He just said it wasn't happening anymore. She shattered a wine glass against the wall and begged him to remember how far they'd come. He left the apartment that night with a single suitcase and went to stay at his parents' house. The wedding wasn't canceled, it was frozen. No new date, no plans, no communication. The next day, Simon's parents held a short meeting with Camille. They told her that all financial contributions from their side were being paused immediately. Nothing further would be considered unless she agreed to attend counseling. She laughed in their faces, called them manipulated, and walked out. An hour later, Camille posted a 40-second Instagram story. She was in tears, walking through a park, talking about betrayal and how jealousy destroys everything. She didn't name names, but the captions were clear. She accused unnamed women of trying to steal her life and ripping apart a love that was meant to last. People weren't buying it. The replies were brutal. One person linked the podcast episode with the timestamp. Another posted a clip of Camille at the brunch, saying therapy was for people who wanted attention. Someone else posted a side-by-side of her story and her past comments with the words, "Pick a personality." That evening, I got an email from a throwaway account. No name, no subject line, just a sentence in the body, "You got what you wanted." But if you knew what she was doing next, you wouldn't sleep tonight. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either, because whatever Camille was planning, it wasn't over. Not yet. The anonymous warning came from a disposable email account. After digging through some metadata and cross-referencing a few digital footprints, it traced back to someone in Camille's bridal party, likely a stylist friend who had gone silent online for days, probably someone who got too close to the mess and panicked. And for good reason. Camille had booked a luxury venue under the name CS Union Celebration, but the event had quietly shifted into what she was now calling a self-marriage ceremony, a public rebranding of the canceled wedding. The twist, she kept Simon's name on the guest list and the printed programs. She planned to explain his absence as a last-minute business conflict. That way, the press would still believe they were a couple, and she could spin it as an empowered, boundary-breaking event while preserving the illusion of a relationship. She sent invites to high-society bloggers, event photographers, and lifestyle magazines under the guise of a feminine strength milestone. A few confirmed, a few declined. One forwarded the invite to me. I forwarded it straight to Simon. He hadn't even known the event was happening. He was listed in the program, mentioned in the Power Couple Achievements timeline, and positioned in seating charts as if he were still her fiancé. His parents found out the next morning and contacted their attorney. By that afternoon, a cease and desist had been sent to the venue, the caterers, and the hired media teams. Simon's name and image were not to be used in any material related to the event. 2 days before the ceremony, the venue pulled out. Camille had already paid for custom flower walls, calligraphed menus, a drone photographer, and a champagne tower built to be caught on video. Every deposit was non-refundable. She lost thousands. She went live on her social media the next morning. No makeup, swollen eyes, and a shaky voice. She said jealous people were trying to ruin her once-in-a-lifetime celebration, that some people couldn't stand to see her win, that true power scares the insecure. She didn't name names, but viewers picked it apart frame by frame. That same night, the podcast released a follow-up episode titled, "When the Mask Slips." It confirmed Camille's full name, her connection to the brunch recording, and even featured a voice analysis expert who had matched other public clips of her speech patterns. It also included quotes from former colleagues, anonymous bakery employees, and a vendor who had been threatened over email. The internet exploded. Screenshots of her messages were shared across Reddit, Twitter, and TikTok. A stitched video comparing her brunch audio to her Instagram Live went viral. The hashtag fake fairy tale climbed trends. Even lifestyle influencers who had once tagged her in posts began quietly removing collaborations or unfollowing her. Then came the fallout. The board of investors tied to the family bakery called a vote. Camille had never been officially listed as an owner, only a spokesperson and assistant manager. They asked her to step away indefinitely while they reviewed internal structure and brand direction. It wasn't personal, they said, just business. The Hamilton family sent out an updated guest list for their next 2 social functions. Camille's name was absent. Evelyn Hamilton sent her a short direct message. "We vet our members. You simply failed the interview." A screenshot of it leaked a day later. In the middle of all this, I received a handwritten letter from Simon. He didn't make excuses. He didn't ask to talk. He simply said he was sorry for being silent, for watching my life get stripped away piece by piece, for convincing himself that keeping peace meant staying quiet. I replied with one line, "Closure is enough. I'm not here to relive what I survived." Weeks later, I was named the head of a new luxury real estate firm, a merger between two boutique companies I'd worked with for years. The launch event was formal. Graham Hamilton gave the opening remarks. He stood behind the podium and said, "Some people earn their place, some steal it, but Harper built hers." No names were mentioned. They didn't need to be. I never reached out to Camille again. I didn't block her. I didn't message her. I didn't respond when people sent me updates about her new beginning or her healing era. But one morning, a small box showed up at my office. No return address. Inside was my old bakery apron. The one with my name stitched into the corner, faded from use, still marked by flour dust in the seams. No note, no explanation. Just the last piece of my past, finally returned to where it belonged. And that was the end.